Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in I Am the Truth by Henri, published by Stanford University Press in 2003, first published in France in 1996. We're going to take a look at our final lesson. It's going to be pages 234 to 259. It'll be part 4 of the Ethics. And we have found that the book has been primarily divided up into a triad. We looked at the phenomenology of the absolute life in the first 94 pages. Then we had 4 chapters on transcendental birth, and then we concluded with 4 chapters on Christian ethics, as huias. This will be the final lesson on ethics. Let's take a look at block 1, beyond secular existence. Henri tells us that there are 2 proofs for the beyond individual existence and the formation of signs, and the misunderstanding of reality evidenced in a series of contradictions. Christianity splits the real between the here below and the beyond is to be realized in the here through ethical transformation. Change always presents itself in the form of objective determinations. So if we look at these concrete objective determinations, Christianity's goal is not the empty imagery of heaven, and he says that life experiences itself in an invisibility, the invisibility of suffering, the invisibility of enjoyment. And Henri posits that within Christianity there is nothing other than life. The truth of world has dominated Western thought, though, and truth of world tells us that reality is just what we see. Reality is appearance. And in note 3, we'll look at Henri's position that reality is more than just what we see. Christianity radically challenges truth of world, especially with regard to ethics, by positing new conditions for effective action. And it does this by articulating the internal possibilities and the possibilities of the newly born self, the transcendental self. So take a look at note 4, the possibilities of the self as the transcendental self. Action takes place through transcendental birth, including the capacity to think and the capacity to imagine, that are ready to be exercised through the givenness of absolute life. And that takes us to absolute life and the transcendental self. We take account of the metaphysical aspect of existence and the religious aspect as well, and the discerning judgment attached to those aspects. We posit the notion of individual agency, and Henri tells us that Christianity circumscribes the sphere of world truth and posits a duplicity of appearing. We covered that in a previous lesson, duplicity of appearing. This duplicity corresponds to the duality of the body. You've got the body of world's truth, which is the body object. You've got the body of life's truth, which is the invisible living body. The invisible body constitutes the real. The visible body is only the exterior representation. So it's this duplicity of appearing that we have to understand, where appearance and reality are basically, reality is a veiled reality, veiled by appearance. But it is the invisible that constitutes the real, and that's what we're going to look at in block 2. The invisible constitutes the real. The real is felt in the invisible pathos of life. The visible world becomes stripped of its pretense of claiming to be the real. It is false appearance. Christianity is the access to what is real in the world. The truth of world contains both sacred and natural truth, and Christianity gives us access to that real world. And note too, Christianity indicates to us where the real lies. The world includes its economy, the social relations, the laws, the social behavior, but Christianity says that behind the social behavior lies the transcendental self, the life of the transcendental self. It's the subjective individual and the real. The reality that constitutes the world's content is life itself. We end up constructing signs to represent these invisible actions. We begin to construct signs of the real, or signs of kingdom. And that's the key aspect here that he wants to emphasize in Note 3, the construction of signs. They become the ideal concepts. Objective reality is ideal, and in itself, as just text, they are unreal signs. It becomes a system of abstractions where the self tries to represent the properties of action, the properties of life itself. And obviously, we have to move beyond abstraction to concrete praxis, but we do pass through that moment of the system of abstractions, the sign model. So let's look at in Note 4, Block 2, Note 4, representing the properties of life. The content of the world proceeds from life and refers back to life. Within this content we have world truth as the inefficient appearance, and truth of life as the revealing of the true, the revealing of the real. Christianity's intuitions make the world intelligible, and it's all revealed on the plane of concrete relations. It's the relations between selves that becomes the sphere within which the real life is unveiled. So if we look at the plane of concrete relations in Block 2, Note 5, the Rhema declarations of Christ now enter to produce revolutionary effect. Transcendental birth pertains to the self and to other selves. We must view other selves as the huioi, as the children of God. We view others as that possibility of becoming the huioi, the children of God. And we look at Galatians 3:28. That's a key verse for Henri in this chapter. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. So we wrap up this block 2 with other selves as the huioi. This implies rejection of the merely visible, because we have an ethical idea of a person under the condition of huios, generated within the absolute life of God himself. The finite is denied. It's merely an appearance. And that's why he quotes Luke 20:27-36, where they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They are like the angels. The visible divisions of relation, that's the sphere within which we understand real life, the sphere of relation. But it's the sphere of relation defined by Paul in Galatians 3:28. And that's where we reach realization of the real in Block 3. Having looked at Galatians, we now move into Block 3 on realization. Henri tells us that the determinations described by Paul in Galatians 3:28 all belong to the relations of life. They're all living, they're all real. To be Greek or Jew is to be determined at the level of sensibility and belonging to the subjective modalities of habit, all taking place within transcendental life. That is where transcendental life takes place, the sphere of human relation. Now note too, in the case of slave or free and male or female, what is said to be objective can only be defined as transcendental subjective experience. as the internal unfolding of body within the self's possibilities of feeling and the self's possibilities of acting. So under note 3, under these possibilities, Paul draws out these relations to define the high point of the real. That's what Galatians 3:28 is. It's the high point of the real, because it concerns the self's condition, the condition of huios. These relations Paul has singled out. They're given to us within the absolute life of God himself. Within the absolute life of God himself. So let's take a look at block 3, note 4. Paul's point is that the determination of absolute life is given to all humanity, all selves, in the very same way as the condition of huios. This self-givenness proceeds as God, then Christ, and then huios. It is the self-giving of phenomenological life in its original selfhood, the selfhood of Christ. So it brings us to the self-giving of original selfhood. This constitutes the entire doctrine of relation to another, or the entire doctrine of Christian ethics. The 6 traits follow. Relation takes place despite worldly appearance. The self takes its selfhood from absolute life alone. We presuppose a relation to others as transcendental selves. We also presuppose the self-generation of the self, and we must enter into the power behind self-generation, and this power is the pathos of the ark Son, Christ. And that really sums up his ethics right there. So now let's take a look at note 7, the ethical consequences of Galatians 3:28. They are the principles of the Christian ethic. It is constituted, our ethic is constituted in the revelation of life. It goes out of itself. In loving God, we also love other selves. It is realized engendering. We participate in the engendering of all living selves by absolute life. Our ethics takes place out of our condition as huios, summarized in Mark 12:28, love your God, love your neighbor, all within the selfhood of the first self, who is Christ. But it is those 3 moments. Christian ethics is constituted, it goes out of itself, and it is a realized engendering. We participate in that realized engendering of absolute life. Constituted, then going out of the self in positing and praxis, and then participation in the realized engendering of the absolute life of the living God. All within the selfhood of Christ in note 8. Realization takes place within the possibility of the transcendental self. That defines selfhood as huios. The condition is preserved in its unchanging structure. True self is only given in absolute life self-giving. Here's the key, we are constantly carried into our condition as huios. It's an ongoing sanctification. We are constantly carried into our condition as huios. Our being in common with other huioi equates with being in God. God himself is implicated in the intersubjective action between selves. That final statement summarizes his position. God himself is implicated in the intersubjective relationship between selves. The area of relation, Galatians 3:28, is the center of Christian ethics for Henri. So it is significant that in this final chapter, he tells us that there is a duplicity of appearing in the world. There's appearance, and appearance veils the real. But the real takes place on the plane of human relation. And that means the transcendental subjective area of human relation. And when you look there, you're looking at dialogue between the huioi, between the children of the living God, who are situated within the self-realization of God himself and bringing forth his kingdom. And that takes you on to how that is realized, and it's realized through our participation in 3 moments. We are constituted in the revelation of life in Christ. We go out of ourselves because loving God means we love our neighbor as ourselves, and then we participate in that realized engendering of absolute life that embraces Christ, and Christ embraces us. So constituted, then going out of the self, and then engendering. All within the arc Son selfhood of Christ. All within his selfhood, which is the revelatory mediation for us to discern the real behind appearance. And he becomes the power of being able to engage in the ministry of positing and praxis. So it gives us a great final lesson on ethics, pages 234 to 259. That's going to wrap up a very good book on phenomenology of absolute life, doctrine of humanity, and doctrine of Christian ethics.